Hey there, I'm Alicia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you a spoiler-free review of Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Let's get right into the video. Okay, holy freaking moly, this has got to be my favorite Brandon Sanderson yet. Yes, you heard it here first, ladies. This is my favorite Brandon Sanderson yet. So for context, I finished Mistborn Era 1 and I started Mistborn Era 2, and now I've also read Warbreaker. And so Warbreaker exists within the Cosmere, and it is also currently a standalone. It has been announced that Brandon Sanderson is going to expand on this series. I think there is already a name for the second book called Nightblood, if I'm not mistaken. Has he started writing it? I don't think so. When is he going to start? I have no idea. Will it be a couple of years before we get another book in this series? Probably. So currently a standalone, and gosh, it was just perfection. And the primary reason why I love this book much more than the Mistborn trilogy is that the characters in Warbreaker just bleed with personality. Right from page 1, when we're introduced to Ciri, like, I already loved her, and I loved every single character in this book. Even Vivina, who is Ciri's sister, she's the one character in here who I think is a little bit unlikable. Even she really grew on me by the end of the book, just because they all have such great personalities. Then on top of that, we have the magic system, the world building, the politics. Everything was just so good. So let's start off with what Warbreaker is about. About 3 centuries ago, the land of Haladrin was united, and then the many war erupted, and this ended with the creation of a new religion called the Iridescent Tones. And the royal line that existed in Haladrin ended up fleeing to the mountains and creating their own city, now called Idris. Now, since then, Haladrin and Idris have been on the brink of war, and we primarily follow 4 characters who are trying to prevent this war from happening, while in the back there's a lot of political machinations and a lot of plotting that's happening. The first character that we follow is Lightsong, and he is a reluctant god. He doesn't believe in his own divinity, and throughout the book he's trying to convince us why he is not worthy and why he's worthless and why he's not very good at his job. So essentially, in this world, if you die with honor or glory, you come back as a god, and then you're given breath to keep you alive. We'll get more into the magic system in a little bit. The second main character that we follow is named Vasher, and we don't really know much about him except that he's plotting something, and he has this magical sword that speaks to him in his mind, and this sword also leaks shadows, and that's really all I can tell you about Vasher. And our last 2 characters are actually sisters. They are both princesses, and they are from Idris. When they were younger, the oldest one, Vivina, was promised to the God King in Haladrin as a way to sort of mend the conflict between the 2 kingdoms. And now that Vivina is of age, her father is reluctant to give her over. However, Vivina has literally been brought up studying everything about Haladrin, what their religion is like, what their politics are like. This has been her life mission. She has been preparing since she was born to become the wife of the God King. Now, on the other hand, we have Ciri. She is the wild-spirited of the 2 sisters. She felt like she could never live up to the expectations set by her family, especially with Vivina, who seems to be perfect and seems to understand everything. And so Ciri is very much the youngest one, the free-spirited one, and the one that in her own way challenges the own beliefs in her kingdom by doing things that she's not supposed to do. And so when the day comes that Vivina needs to be sent over to Haladrin, her father ends up sending Ciri, who was not at all prepared to be sent over to Haladrin to marry the God King. And so that is the setting and the political background when we start Warbreaker. Ciri is going to be sent to the God King. Vivina is confused and she doesn't understand why she isn't being sent. She feels like her life's goal has been taken from her. And so she decides to go ahead and chase after Ciri and save her sister, because Vivina thinks that Ciri is going to die there, that she's not prepared and she's not going to be able to handle everything that is thrown at her while she's there. So again, I think it was the characters that really sold me on Warbreaker. They each had a distinct personality, distinct motivations, and they were just, like, they're some of the best characters that I have ever read. Their personalities were bleeding off the page. I love them so much. Now, in terms of the world building, It's Brandon Sanderson. Just like Mistborn, it's very imaginative, it's very intricate. The religion and the politics are really fleshed out. What I found particularly interesting in Warbreaker is that there's a lot of juxtaposition and a lot of dualities. We have Idris, who is sort of devoid of color. They're in a way the more conservative of the two kingdoms. They have a very strict religion that they live by. They are not allowed to do certain things. They're not allowed to wear color. They just have really strict rules that they live by. On the other hand, you have the kingdom of Haladrin now that has the iridescent tone. Everything in Haladrin is very colorful. Women are able to expose more flesh. You also have the God King and all of the returned. The returned are people who died with glory and were brought back as gods. There's just so much juxtaposition between these two cities and even between the two sisters. We have Vivina and we have Ciri. Vivina is very committed to her life's goal. She is the one that trained. She is very respectful. She is dutiful. And then you have Ciri, who is bursting with personality, and she's very wild and very free and thinks for herself. And apart from that, there's just so many different elements that are woven throughout that again are dualities and juxtapose each other to really make the reader think. And I really enjoyed that nuanced conversation, like duty versus doing the right thing, or those morally gray situations that arise from having two separate belief systems and two separate cities that stand for different things. It was just so well done. So now let's talk about the writing and pacing. The writing style, just like any other Brandon work, is very digestible and very easy to read. I never have trouble with Brandon Sanderson's writing style whatsoever. The pacing, I think it's what puts most people off with Warbreaker. It's not necessarily fast-paced. I would say it's actually a very slow-paced book for the first 80 to 90% of the book. The pacing reminded me a lot of The Well of Ascension, which is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. It's very slow. There's a lot of politics and a lot of maneuvering and a lot of complicating plot schemes that are being developed, and you don't really notice all of this until you get to the several plot twists throughout the storyline. But I will say that even though it has a very slow moving plot and pace, that it really culminates into this very grand and satisfying ending. So I do think that the slow pace is worth it, although I will have to say for me particularly, the ending did feel a little bit rushed. I wish we could have had an extra 20 or 30 pages. That is like a very minor thing, but all of the different plot lines did come together into a very impactful and very satisfying ending. So no complaints there. So now let's talk about the magic system, and it's a little bit difficult to talk about, but it's one of the most unique magic systems that I have ever read. And I really love that this magic system is based on bringing things to life, giving your breath to something to awaken it. The magic system in Warbreaker is also really interesting too, because within the book, it's actually still being not developed, but still being understood. All of the elements of the magic system are still not all known, and there are very few select people who really know and understand how it works. And the magic system itself is based on biochroma, and like I said earlier, on awakening things with the essence of breath. And so people are able to take in breaths, and these breaths accumulate within your body, and you get to different levels of heightening. And depending on which level of heightening you have, you're sort of able to experience the world in a different way. You're able to have aura recognition, attain perfect pitch, or attain agelessness. It depends on the level of heightening that you do acquire based on the number of breaths that you have. Now, with these breaths that you hold, you're able to awaken things. So for example, if you have an object, you're able to give it your breath and awaken it for it to do something that you want it to do. And the more that an object resembles something human-like, the less breaths that it takes to awaken. But breaths are limited, and people have a really hard time obtaining breath. You have to buy it or you have to take it from someone, but people need to give away their breath willingly. That you can't just kill someone. If you kill someone with their breath, but they don't give it to you, it just goes with them. So like I said earlier, it was just a very unique magic system. I just felt like Warbreaker has so much life. It honestly feels like Warbreaker gave me breath. Like I feel heightened after reading this book. I wish I could go back and read it for the first time. I actually already want to reread it because it was so damn good, and I can't wait for the sequel to come out. So briefly, some final thoughts on on Warbreaker. I thought it was very interesting and intriguing how the buildup of Warbreaker is to avoid war. A lot of other fantasy books that I read or just sci-fi books that I read, we're already at war, or we're following characters that are trying to complete a heist or trying to overthrow something, or we're already in the middle of a fight and it's about who's gonna win. But I don't think I've ever read from the perspective of people who are trying to prevent war. So that was just very interesting to me. I just really love that aspect of it. I'm someone who very much enjoys political and mind games. So if you're someone who likes that, I think you should check out Warbreaker because it's done so well. I also have to briefly mention there's this very endearing romance in Warbreaker that I didn't really touch on. I'm not the biggest romance fan. I do like romance occasionally here and there. This is a very slow burn romance and it's very endearing and it made me giggle. I don't think a romance between two characters has ever made me giggle. This one did. It was very endearing. It was very cute. But as a call out for those of you who don't like romance, it's very minimal. It's like barely there. So yes, those are my thoughts on Warbreaker. Let me know down below if you've read it and if you loved it as much as I did. Are you excited for the second book whenever it comes? Also, so help me out here. For those of you who have read more books by Brandon Sanderson than I have, I'm thinking of jumping into Elantris after this and then jumping into the Stormlight Archives. Do you think I should do that, or should I finish Mistborn Era 2 first, then jump into Stormlight Archives and leave Elantris at the end? I guess my big question is, should I finish Mistborn Era 2 before jumping into the Stormlight Archives? Let me know, because your girl really wants to start the Stormlight Archives. And as much as I'm enjoying Mistborn Era 2, it has this very like Western aspect to it that I'm not quite enjoying. I don't like Westerns. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!